You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Supplemental: The Hageman Brothers return.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson. Just like our flagship Mission Log podcast, each week here on Mission Log Prodigy, we discuss every episode of this animated series, discover what makes them special, and see if there are any morals, meanings, or messages that we have learned. However, as Star Trek Prodigy is on a break until later this year, instead of our usual review show this week, we have a very special episode for all the Star Trek Prodigy fans. We are going to do something a little different. We're going to look at the first 5 episodes of Star Trek Prodigy from a more adult fan's point of view, because this series speaks to older Trek fans as much as it does to the younger cadets like ourselves.
And before we jump into it, just like all the other podcasts, this show is produced for both YouTube and as a regular podcast. So please be sure to engage the like button and subscribe to Mission Log Prodigy here on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel. Please make sure you listen to podcasts.roddenberry.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the podcasts, or wherever you listen to your Roddenberry podcast. You can also follow us on Mission Log Prodigy on Twitter. That's at ML_Prodigy to keep up with all of our latest news and updates like this, because we're in this giant drought of Prodigy. We don't know when it's going to be coming back. We know it's going to be later this year. Our previous episode with the Hagemans, they also alluded to that's going to be later this year. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to Twitter, and we'll try and fill you in as best as we can on whatever news that we get. Right?
Yeah. Like action figures.
Right. Okay. So this is a little bit of an off format show, folks. We're going to be a little bit kind of like fast and loose, a little bit chatty. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the action figures, the reveal that we saw online. We saw an image of 5, I believe, 5 action figures. Mm-hmm. Like we saw Gwyn, Dal, Zero, Murph, and Jankum Pog. Mm-hmm. We know that Janeway and Rok-Tahk didn't make the image, right? But it was confirmed, I believe, that they will be part of that offering, the original offering, right? There was also, I think, for about a nanosecond, an image of other products in the works, such as a protostar.
Yeah.
I do believe we saw that. And I also do believe we saw a tricorder.
Ooh, I didn't see that. That's exciting.
I believe it went up and then it came back as quickly down as, as a hot second, because it probably shouldn't have been revealed. But I have to believe that because the show is designed for a certain audience, they should get their cellular peptide toys cake and be able to eat it too. Don't you think?
I do. And the funny thing about when those pictures dropped, when all of the initial coverage came out, is it was after you and I had actually spoken to the Hagemans, but before the episode came out. And there was a lot of action figure talk on the episode itself, which was like so funny. And then the reveal came out and it was like, look at us. We're psychic. We're so smart. We know exactly what's going on. I thought it really bolstered us. When I didn't see Rock in the initial lineup, before it was announced that she is going to be part of it, I thought maybe because she's going to be so much bigger than the others, they were going to wait and see if the line sold well enough to justify printing something that big, or maybe it was going to be something like a Build-A-Figure, which we see a lot in the Marvel Legends and the DC side of things. But the action figures look so good. But my question about that protostar is, are the action figures going to be able to fit inside of it? This is my real question.
Okay, so that would be amazing. But we have seen, what was it, from Playmates, that they created an Enterprise with a removable bridge top, and then you could put smaller scale version of, obviously that the scale has been a little fudged so that you can have your little action figures, then put them in their stations and stuff like that. But the protostar isn't that big of a ship. I mean, when we see the flybys, when we see the fly-throughs into the window, into the bridge, things of that nature, and seeing it from the external to the internal, it only looks like it's a ship that fits about 20, maybe 25 crew. So that would be nice to get a cockpit that opens up so you can put miniature figures in. But I guess the next big thing is, when will one of my favorite vendors, one of my favorite producers of all these products, when will Eagle Moss, when will they premiere their version of the Protostar?
Well, STLV's coming up, Chicago's coming up, SDCC is coming up. So I think there's a lot of, I think you and I are going to have an action figure special at some point this year.
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah. Like, because this is a supplemental episode. We're going to be talking about more of the adult type responses to Prodigy, because that's something that we have heard from time to time. Is like, of course, our listeners love hearing the kids that call in, because the kids are getting their entry point and their kind of like their first experience with Prodigy. But it's a really interesting dynamic that's happening in the adult fandom that we haven't had a chance to talk about because of the format of our show, but supplementals are a little bit different. So yeah, toys. Absolutely. I remember when we interviewed the Hagemans the first time, they were always talking about toys. They're big. What's the word that they used when they were working with Lego and Ninjago?
Toyetic. That's a Netflix word. I've heard that from a couple people from the Netflix side of things before. Yeah.
Yeah. So Prodigy is totally toyetic. And you know what? I know if you're not like big into toys, get these now, like when they get released, because when you're, say, if you're like of a certain age, get them now. And then like 20 years from now, you're going to be able to send like somebody to college with some
Absolutely. Of these. Also, they're great. Like the Kurgan Spock that Playmates made were sick. So they're going to turn out nicely.
I think so too. And then with those molds, sometimes that they can send them to, say, do a licensing with Hallmark. You're going to get your ornaments based on those molds. We've seen those before based on action figures.
Oh, the ornaments crew is going to show up.
I have, there's a very famous Christmas ornament designer. I can't remember his name, but they come out with these special, like one of a kind ornaments. Like every year you can get them at Neiman Marcus, shows, stores like that. And they're like, one of them looked like Murph. One of them I had looked like Murph. It was an octopus, but it was like iridescent glowy blue with glitter.
Ooh,
I'm like,
cool.
Okay, there's your Murph. Murph is be like the perfect Christmas ornament, right?
I want a Murph tree topper.
What are you going to buy first?
Ooh, I mean, my girl Rock, but I don't have a Christmas tree, so it'll just live in my home somewhere for the holiday season.
And double as an action figure, and then obviously you're going to put that on something somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right?
Probably double as a cat toy. Let's be very real.
Okay. So there have been a lot of really awesome, like fan-made items that we've seen like on Twitter. One of which was a stuffed rock. I think it was done by the same family that did the stuffed Murph.
The Pete Murph.
Yeah. Right.
Her description, I'm not trying to be silly, but she described it as looking kind of like a peep. It kind of does, but also that's how Murph is shaped.
Like those peep chickens that you get at Easter time?
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do that, though. I feel like they made Murph candies. I don't know if I could do that to a Murph. Like, it's like the opposite. Like, Murph would be eating the candy, not we be eating the candy of Murph.
But you also know that Murph is powerful enough that he could absolutely survive your digestive tract. So
this is true.
He can survive the vacuum of space.
Murph literally is an everlasting gobstopper if he was in the water.
Absolutely.
Right? So you would have, what was his name, like Slugworth, and like put down a little bitty Murph, and like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think I'm going to take it.
Yeah,
I win the Wonka prize, and then. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff, like a lot of great products coming up. I would like to see more books being advertised.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite recent purchases, because I got into Troll Hunters, thanks to Prodigy, is the Troll Hunters book, which is like this wonderful, very easy to read book, but it has these great maps and all these great illustrations. I'd love something like that for Prodigy, so we can start getting like a lot of these still shots of characters and scenes, and so we can pour over that kind of stuff, because it's kind of hard to do it when you're watching it on screen, don't you think?
Yes, definitely, because not everyone has the ability to run and pause depending on what your format of choice is, or if you're like us and you're watching like screeners, then it's not always super easy to pause, blow something up, and really go in on little Easter eggs. Nickelodeon, though, traditionally, who is the distributor of the show, does a lot of comic book tie-ins.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I'm just saying, if you're doing a Prodigy tie-in, I am an award-losing children's comic book author. So
you're a loft leader?
Shoot my shot right here. But either way, I would really love to see like additional adventures, or like even if it was a collection of short stories that was like unseen holodeck adventures of the crew, I think that would make such a cool comic book. And comics are books, so why not?
Yeah, I like that idea. Now, if you're familiar with like the way that Nickelodeon markets its products, towards its fans, is that something that's an inevitability, or is it something that's on a wish list?
Oh, that's interesting. I think at this point it's an inevitability, because like I think of Avatar specifically, and like Legend of Korra got a whole like extended set of seasons. So did Avatar, and I just think that would tie in so well. And there's already a rich world of Star Trek comics, so. I think it's a matter of when, not if, because when could be later this year. Like I said, we got a bunch of big cons. There's so much time left to make these amazing announcements, maybe after the first season finally properly wraps up. But let's be honest, Prodigy's got at least 3 years in it. So
I would think
there's
so.
time. Yeah.
I mean, really think about like what it's done so far in only 10 episodes, how it's kind of like changed the paradigm of Star Trek fandom. And I think that's something that I kind of like want to springboard into now, like going into the conversation about these first 5 episodes. I never thought in a million years that I would be as deep into Prodigy as I am, like personally, spiritually, emotionally, from the first 5 episodes, let's be honest. The second 5 episodes just kind of like anchored that, like cemented the fact that I wasn't wrong about these initial feelings. Calling this, and I've heard this many times out there in social media, you've probably heard this too, but how do you feel about it when people talk about this show as being a quote unquote kids show? Do you think that it's misrepresenting the show, or do you think that it is what it is? It's
tough because it is what it is. It is a show on a network that is primarily marketed toward a younger viewing audience, even though for at least as long as I've experienced Nickelodeon, grown-ups have been watching Nickelodeon shows. Like Nickelodeon has always been more of a 4-quadrant storyteller than maybe some other studios that like market to a similar audience, like DreamWorks, for example, even though like Trollhunters is DreamWorks and Netflix and very much like hits those as well. But Nickelodeon, like I think about the cartoons of the 90s, and then again, Avatar is the laziest, easiest comparison, has always had a much wider viewing audience than simply like 8 to 10-year-olds. But the problem with using the phrase kids show is that we say that as if it's derisive, right? Because yes, we can all look back at things in our past and be like, well, I was a kid. I loved it. I didn't know it was bad. I didn't know any better. But also children aren't stupid and children aren't unsophisticated. Right. And I think that's a great strength of Prodigy. And I think that's why it does transcend, like, again, the lazy comparison, like Star Wars Rebels. That's why it transcends simply the target demographic of like middle schoolers, and it can reach people of all ages. And I think those who choose to dismiss it as simply a kid's show, instead of like, wow, this is a kid's show, I think that says more about them than it says about the show itself, ultimately.
I mean, you think that that's a reaction of being kind of like a product of a certain cynical time where one is supposed to shed kind of like the trappings of immaturity, and some of those trappings are comic books and toys and animation and things like that, so that you can go into the quote unquote working world where you put on a tie, you put on a suit, you get your hair cut, you brush your teeth in the morning, you adult, you pay the bills, and et cetera. Is this kind of a show the kind of a show where it returns somebody like that? I'll put myself, say, in that example, to a much simpler, more rewarding experience, a time and experience of entertainment. Do you think that there's a nostalgia factor that's being captured with the way that this is being presented? Because I've tried other animated shows and they haven't worked for me in the same way that this has worked for me from a connectivity level, an emotional connectivity level. Why this, do you think, for many adults that have spoken up about it in social media and who we've talked to?
To speak first to the question about sort of an adulting audience, I guess, I find it very interesting that as adults, we are supposed to sort of shuffle off those things that we loved when we were younger, when something like Spider-Man or The Batman are the 2 highest grossing movies in recent memory, certainly. So it's funny that something like Star Trek Prodigy kind of gets like washed away in a different storm amidst those 2 live action. And part of that is animation, right? Like animation in Western society doesn't get its due. Like you look at like the Eastern manga and anime traditions, and like it's much something like Studio Ghibli is like much more respected. But I think the return to nostalgia is what appeals to people. But I also think a huge part of it is Star Trek. Like Star Trek comes with a set of expectations for good or for ill, which can lead to, on the bad side of the internet, this isn't Star Trek. But on the good side, it can also lead to like a quick shorthand of like, this is Star Trek. I know the rules of this world. I know the types of characters these are. So I think it being part of a larger universe actually makes the bar for entry for mature fans a lot lower. I think it's harder for a kid to get into this than for a veteran Star Trek fan. And it's obviously not that hard for kids to get into it, so they're doing a great job.
Well, I mean, from our younger cadets that are calling in with their parents, obviously their parents are kind of helping them put together their thoughts and ideas and putting together a voicemail, which has been amazing. I mean, we have had callers from age 3 to age 9, 10, maybe a little bit older. Boys and girls. I'd say young men and women, but they're not even that young men and women. They are boys and girls that are calling in. And remember, the first 5 episodes, just in case anyone's keeping score, we have episode 1/2, we have Lost and Found, we have Starstruck, which is episode 3, we have Dreamcatcher, which is episode 4, and episode 5, which is Terra Firma. Before I get to the next question, because you dovetailed perfectly into what I was going to ask, have you settled on a favorite of the first 5?
I think it's a tie between Dreamcatcher and Terra Firma of the first 5. I think so. And I just think that's because by that point we're done with intros.
Yeah.
And so that's when the story engine really kicks off. But they are all great. I've rewatched Prodigy numerous times, and I don't think there's a single stinker in the whole thing. Do you have a fave?
Out of these first 5, I think Terra Firma was, because that was the first time, and I can freely admit this to all of you, the listeners out there, my friends, our loyal fan base. I cried horribly, like in a good way, like ugly man joyous tears when the protostar was engaged for the very first time. And the funny thing is that you've seen it happen like time and time again, or at least the first 5 times when we saw it in the opening 5 credits, right, of the show. Mm-hmm. But you never got to see it, what it meant. Right. There's context is king. Sorry,
yes, I had to pull that.
Context is king. So when you put the context behind how the protostar was engaged for the very first time and why, it all came together. It was singularly like the most emotionally powerful moment for me in the first 5 episodes. And depending on, what I've done that day in the next 4 or 5 episodes, I also cry pretty much at the end of every episode in those. So as a 50-year-old man, I know, because you can tell I'm dyeing like the white strands in my hair as we speak. It's very, very, very emotionally powerful as a show. And I do agree, actually, that there is something about Star Trek, quote unquote, Star Trek being in there. And I think that there is a part of us that always tries to identify with the outsider looking in. They're probably the most appealing character because they're the character that they don't necessarily push the envelope as much as they examine the envelope. Like, why?
Said.
Thank you. I was thinking more like Spock, but there's the alien or the character that is trying to understand why humanity is trying to improve upon itself and trying to reach a certain aspect of its evolution. You had Spock, you have Data, you have Odo, right? You have the EMH, you have, Dr. Picardo. That's why I like calling him Dr. Picardo. These are characters that try to strive and understand what humanity is about. But in doing so, we see them struggle through sometimes, and evolve through these cautionary tales, these aspirational goals of wanting to be better. And through them, we see the morality, the morals, meanings, and messages that we like talking about here on our Mission Log podcasts. The thing is about Prodigy is that all of the characters are outsiders looking in. They were called unwanted for a reason. So I know this may sound heavy as a question, Ashley, and I really want you to kind of think about this. And this is why we wanted to do this adult, more themed show. What is the series saying to us as the audience, specifically to the young adults that this show is marketed to, which is why I started off with who is this show marketed to? In this day and age, is the aspect of found family most important in this day and age? Deeds, actions, and not just simply words and lip speak from adults to kids? Is that more important? So being targeted towards a younger audience, being marketed towards a younger audience, but still having the Star Trek ideal of trying to find a better way forward, what do you think this series is actually trying to say?
I think that this series is actually trying to let us know that we are all from, let's bring up Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We are all from the island of misfit toys, that even someone like Gwyn is so obviously your cool kid, your popular girl allegory. Dal too, but just a slightly lesser extent. He's like the weird kid, but who's still in the cool clique in your school. That even those people who seem to have everything, who seem to have it together, who are the daughters of your slave master, they have just as much going on, and they are, I don't want to say suffering. I feel like that might be a little too dark, but they're struggling just as much as everyone else. And just because we look different and sound different and act different and identify, I love like Zero being non-binary, which makes complete sense for the producer. Like that means so much to me, and I know it means so much to a lot of other people. That we can all come together in spite of our differences. And I know that sounds trite because that's something that we've been trying to learn as children, trying to teach children, I think, as long as there's been children. But I feel like now, because we're in this, I'm going to call it a woke era, and I mean that as a good thing. I think that Prodigy really examines that and takes that on board and is trying to build a better world through these characters for the viewers watching. And I think there's some adult viewers who could take that lesson to heart as well.
Yeah, it's one of the, I think, most consistent, probably most standout elements in Prodigy, how easy it is, how clear it is to be able to identify with the morals and meanings and messages of what it's trying to say, not just for a younger viewer, because it has been proven time and again at the end of many of our episodes where the younger callers would call it and say this is what they understood from the episode. But from the adults
They're all
too.
So smart.
The sophistication of these children is staggering.
It makes me feel good about the future, honest. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay, because they're seeing it from this standpoint. The great thing about Prodigy is that you have this working on so many different levels. So from, say, a 3-year-old to a 6-year-old to a 9-year-old, I mean, generationally, those are only 3 years apart, but developmentally, those are huge areas of development.
Huge, yeah.
When you're growing up. And then you have, you kick off puberty, you kick off adolescence, but this show will start changing over the course of time with, your collective life experiences and how you ping back to what is being said, what is being shown on the show, which begs the bigger question. How is it possible that in 22 minutes, the standard length for an episode like this, are the Hageman brothers and their team, you have Benny Bond, you have, the Benson sisters, you have Aaron Waltke, all of these talents in 22 minutes being able to condense and to formulate a story that is so clear, yet so singular in its effect of being able to focus on all these different characters singularly or as an ensemble, to have this message resonate so singularly, so clearly with an audience. Where do you think that comes from, and how is it? This is not casting shade. This is an actual question. This is not casting shade, but how is it possible for them to do it in such a short amount of time versus, say, a live action show, which takes literally twice the amount of time, if not just a little bit more? Is it because in animation, you don't really have room for interpretation? Is it because in animation, the way that things are so tightly locked down in terms of budgets and constraints of talent and et cetera, that you don't have time for roll the tape, take another take, do another interpretation, and we'll figure that one out? The George Lucas method of shooting film.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the case? They have to be very, very focused, very, very streamlined in the storytelling in an animation like this?
I think ultimately the buck always stops with the showrunners. And it's an incredible team. You and I recognize a lot of these writers' names as soon as they were announced. So they have top tier talent coming to work on this. And some of that, to be very honest, is the appeal of working on a Star Trek show. That legacy in Hollywood and in the entertainment machine is very real, but it's the Hagemans managing and executing and approving everything to the highest standard and demanding that of everybody who works with them. I also think part of it is actually going back to our conversation a little bit earlier about it's just a kid's show or it's just animation. Animation like with Lower Decks, doesn't always get the same time and care and resources like you're saying, like a live action show gets. And I think they're kind of left in their corner a little bit. And if they make a show that they want to watch, then that's that's not necessarily executive noted to death. And I don't mean to imply that that's what's happening on the live action side. I'm simply making a comparison. I think that a lot of magic makes it through that might not have made it through if this were, like a live action Nickelodeon show. If this were young actors and this was being shot, as you say, all day, every day for months and months on end, I don't know if they'd be able to get away with as much. But because it's animation, I think they're kind of making it in their bubble. And I think it just freaking rocks because of that.
Yeah, I think that at least the way that the Hagemans, I remember they described it before, it's they can't afford to literally, like monetarily wide, can't afford to do all these different type of outtakes just to try.
Yeah.
Right. So the tone has to be, very streamlined and it has to be very consistent. And I guess that helps also with not having to appeal to like original animation formats where networks and executives, they had to appeal to a certain, let's just say for lack of a better word, they have to, for a certain element, the advertisers that want to push your creativity in a certain way, right? Because they want you to compete, your ad dollars, their ad dollars are very important because that's how you pays for the shows, right? Back in the old model. It's very impressive that in a very bite-sized, very condensed, very entertaining, and very layered format, storytelling format, that all of this can be accomplished in such a condensed amount of time. And I think that's why also it's probably achieved the success that it has, because the investment that you have watching this with your children who have a certain amount of time and attention and combination of both on the extremes sometimes.
Yeah.
It hits the right sweet spot of destination. Can I even call it TV anymore? How do people watch this or consume this at home? Yeah.
I think it's like it's achieved that Pixar thing where everyone from 9 to 99 is going to be able to find something. And I see a lot of the comments where parents are saying that their children don't sit still for anything, but they'll watch a whole episode of Prodigy, and that is quite something.
Yeah. And thanks to you, I'm probably gonna have to put Avatar: The Last Airbender on my watch list because I've never seen it before.
You're gonna love it. Mako's in it. You're gonna love it.
Okay. All right. Now here's something fun. Here's something that I did put out this request several months ago and just recently for some of our adult fans to call in or send us an email or communicate with us so that they can share their interpretation and their feedback of what Prodigy means to them as adults. So actually, what do you say? Let's jump into our very first email read on our podcast.
Ooh, yes, let's. Okay. Hi, I'm at Commander_Meg on Twitter, and I saw your tweet asking for the adult viewers of Star Trek Prodigy, and here's my answer. My name is Margot, pronounced Margot. The T is silent, comme en français. And I'm 24 years old. I'm a biomed engineering student. Damn, you got a real person job. Wow. Personally, Dreamcatcher and Terra Firma really resonated with me. Yes. And Gwyn reminds me a lot of myself. Gwyn's arc in realizing her father wasn't the person she thought he was, and her ultimate decision to cut him out really resonated with me because when I was little, I really idolized my father. But when I got older, I realized how harmful and backwards his behavior and viewpoints were. And I had to make the decision to distance myself. Seeing this on screen in a kid's show was very moving emotionally, showing young people that just because someone is an adult or parent doesn't mean they are a good person. I hope that answer works for you. Sincerely, Margot. First of all, good for you, Margot, as an adult person realizing that, because sometimes the best thing that you can do for your relationship with someone is put distance between yourself. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them and that none of that matters. But I think she brings up an excellent point that we don't see children exercising that type of decision-making. Now, not everybody gets to leave their home in a spaceship as a child, so that definitely helps put the distance. But that is a really emotionally intelligent arc that Gwyn has in these starting in the early episodes. I think just paying off in our most recent couple episodes.
Well, I think we also mentioned this as an arc in the first 5 episodes where Dal is concerned, at least, he's very distrusting of adult figures and adult organizations. I mean, the little that he knows of Starfleet, I mean, Jank and Pog makes the argument, as Jank and Pog usually does, because he loves to argue, that the Federation doesn't sound so bad, right? You know, you can get your hot meals from the replicators. They have this fancy starship. You know, it looks like it's spit polished and cleaned like every day. This is not a bad deal. And Dal's like, you can't trust adults. You know, the only people that we can trust are us so far. And the funny thing is that they trust each other when they actually start becoming adults.
Yes.
Or making adult decisions.
Imagine that.
Right? But it all goes back to this whole, as I borrow this line from the great 1982, 84, forgive me for getting this date wrong, film with Barry Bostwick called Megaforce. The motto is deeds, not words, right? So this is where Janeway comes in and shows them, I'm going to, by my deeds, show you how the Federation is applicable to helping you and helping fulfill your needs and desires and dreams, because I'm going to embody that with my actions, even as a hologram, and not just giving you lip service where Dal's like, yeah, I've heard it all before. Yeah, you're going to treat us better. You're going to feed us better food. You're going to, put us in better bunks. You're going to give us, better this, better that. All these promises that sometimes, at least for him, now that we know that he was raised by a Ferengi, never came to be.
Yeah.
The same thing with Gwyn. Yeah. And I love that, it was hard to to distinguish between Dreamcatcher and Terra Firma, because they were literally, it's
absolutely
a two-parter, right? Yeah. All righty. Who else do we have, actually?
We have sweet friend. Hello, Norman Ashley. My name is... It's Charlene, right? Not Charlie. I always call her Char, so I've never tried to pronounce your name properly.
Char's fine.
Char. Well, she's put her full name, so Charlene, I apologize. I'm 40 years old, and I adore Prodigy. Everything about this show has been so well executed. That's saying a lot for only 5 episodes. But if what we have seen is any indication of what's in store for the rest of the season, we fans are in for a heck of a journey, and I cannot wait. Is the break over yet? It's not. If I have any criticisms of the show, it's these painstaking breaks. You and me both, girl. To be honest, it's difficult singling out any one episode of the show because they have all built toward the big moments in episode 5. I love that we're seeing Dal slowly learning to trust Hollow Janeway when he knows he's too inexperienced to know what's best. I think it was important to show Gwyn seeing her father for who he truly is, because sadly, not all parents act with their children's best interests in mind. And I am looking forward to seeing how all the characters will continue learning from each other as they form deeper bonds by working together. These are all fantastic things to portray for kids, and it's just as good for us adults too. What has surprised me the most about Prodigy is how accessible it is to everyone. This show is geared toward kids, but truly has something for everybody, no matter one's age or previous Trek knowledge. Prodigy is an accessible entry point for those unacquainted with the Trek universe, while giving longtime fans plenty to enjoy as well. I applaud the writers for making this balancing act look easy, although it most certainly is not. You both know I could go on forever about this show, but I'll stop here. Thank you for all you do, LLAP, Char.
Thanks, Char. It's a funny thing that she and
she coming for our gigs with all that good analysis.
She knows what's happening. And the funny thing is we have these weekly chats every time that there's a live action Prodigy. And I should say live action. I should say a new Prodigy that happens like every Thursday, when it was happening on every Thursday. And then we would go into these deep analytical discussions. And I found it fascinating that in 22 minutes, after several viewings, an hour and a half conversation later, that's how deep these episodes can go. Now, Ashley, you're a young adult writer. You're a young adult content writer.
I am. Right? Award losing.
Award or lost leader. I like the leader in there. So your approach to appealing to a younger audience, like she's saying here, it's no easy feat to appeal to a younger audience, with content maybe that has to hit all these different messages. How do you approach doing that? Like, what's your workflow when you try and say, okay, this is the message that I want? If you were writing a script for Star Trek Prodigy, how would you approach that with the experience that you have?
I would definitely start with what the lesson is that you're trying to learn, or which is often tied up in what the character arc is. So what you're trying to serve in the overarching narrative, both within the episode and then within the larger context of the show. We do that with our comics. What are we trying to do in this volume versus like the complete 5-volume story. And then honestly, I just try to make it interesting for myself, because a lot of my tastes haven't changed that much since I was this target out. Like, I've been watching Star Trek pretty much my entire life, and reading and watching comic book content pretty much my entire life. And if it's interesting to me, then it will be interesting for a young person. There's, for me, very little consideration in how to speak to the audience directly, unless it is a climactic moment where you know there's going to be a bunch of exposition. And maybe I'll take out a phrase like albeit and take that down to what the characters' respective vocabularies would be and make it a little bit clear. You always put a little bit more exposition in for a younger audience. And that's one of the reasons that makes our job so easy, talking about morals, meanings, and messages, because they pretty much tell us what we have to learn, which, to be fair, as you're seeing in Voyager, like Harry Kim does that a lot too, but you just get more of it. You get it every single episode or every single installation.
Kids.
Yeah. I mean, it's that, but you just do it. Hopefully you do it with a funnier tone, but kids are smart, man. And we don't give them enough credit for how smart they are, but Prodigy does.
The thing of when I used to take writing courses and majoring in English and et cetera, one of the things that our creative writing instructor always told us, and you probably heard the same thing too, write what you know, right? The authenticity will come through, and then you can apply it and you can mold it to the context and the content and the world building that you're creating in your own narrative for whatever narrative you're creating. So with Margot's and Char's comments, the one through line, and we've talked about this also, that means that the through line for at least 4 people and probably more for Gwyn and for Doubt is this whole aspect of not being able to trust the people that raised you. Now, extrapolating the write what you know, do you think that these writers, this writers team of the Hagemans and their pool of writers, is this something?
Issues?
No. I can't speak for that for certain. I'm sure that I'm not. I can't speak to that for certain.
No.
But,
I'm being facetious.
But the thing is that is this something that they've studied in the psychology of children today that they wanted to apply into their storyline? Do you think that that's a possibility because it's so prevalent in the main thrust of their 2 main characters?
Definitely. And I think I would guess, because I don't know for a scientific fact, I would guess that some of the writing staff are parents, and everyone has been a child at some point. So this does fall into the write what you know, because even if you have the best, well-meaning, most loving parents, they have done things to you that have hurt you or betrayed your trust, or maybe didn't have your best interests in mind at that moment. Maybe we're more selfishly motivated. And that sounds really sad, but that is a theme that is universally held, I think, across all of people. And I think it's very intelligent that that is what is being presented here. And it's not always presented in like a hateful way either. It's just presented as a point of fact, because I don't think it's always meant in a hateful way. But the opposite side of that coin is that people will come into your life. You will find your family. Right. And I think that was probably the idea of found family or find your tribe or anything like that. I'd bet that was on their writer's room pin board or their virtual note board. Like that, I think would have been somewhere near the top. And I applaud the Hagemans and the writing team for being so clear with their messaging, because you see it in every single episode. And I think that on the flip side, I mean, everything's kind of like heavily weighed in our discussion right now on the Diviner and Gwyn's relationship and the betrayal there. And then obviously Dal's, his distrust of adult figures, but then all of a sudden here's Janeway. Yeah. And Janeway tips the scales back into either in favor or of equilibrium of the scales, where these children ranging in age are looking at the positive side of a paternal force, the nurturing side, as the Hagemans said. They wanted a character that was more, or Janeway at least specifically, because she had this incredible balance of strength, and maternal instinct, and the nurturing aspect of not just her leadership style, but I think her characterization of just caring, for this crew of hers. So it's nice that for whatever happens with the Diviner and that side of the equation,
Janeway is always there to bring it back. Now, in the last few minutes that we have here, I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, because is she the only real option that they had for that particular direction for a trustable, or trustworthy and relatable leader for these kids?
I think certainly in the first 5 episodes, I think she is pretty much their only option outside of Dal and Quinn themselves, who I would say are less like parental figures, and they're a little more like elder sibling figures. And I think it was the right choice to not make them mom and dad of the crew. I think that would have been too obvious. I think it would have been a little too ham-fisted ultimately. I think having Janeway there as a more neutral party was a smart choice. I do think, however, I know we're going to talk about later episodes, like on another episode or whatever. I do think this introduction of another crew, I think, might introduce a little more crew of trustworthy adults coming into their lives. But yeah, we will see, because Chakotay's got some shade going on. But I think that we needed this period of growth led by hologram Janeway to get to whatever that's going to be. And that's not spoilers. We haven't seen it yet.
Right. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see like what the dynamic's going to be now that these more mature, young people, they have a better understanding of, say, how the universe works, and
well said.
But sometimes when you start to settle with that trust, things change, and experiences. Life is the great educator, and every single time your life experience and expectancy changes, the entire model changes and you level up. Right?
Yeah, very much.
So that armor set, that emotional armor set that you think was carrying you through some of the trials in, your last couple of raid events, i.e., big confrontations, with the powers that be. Once you learn from that, you level up and the entire thing starts over again. And I think that's what's going to happen in the next 10 episodes. Remember, we're talking about the first 5 of 10, and there's an entire 10 that's coming at the back half of this year, and this break is far too long, but this is why we're doing what we're doing, and we will do this again soon.
Oh, so sad face. That means we've reached the end of our show, but thank you everyone for joining us here on Mission Log Prodigy. I am so happy to be back talking about this with all of you and Norm again. And if you enjoyed our show as much as we did, please make sure that you smash the like and share and subscribe button on our Mission Log Prodigy playlist on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel, or find us on your podcast catcher of choice. Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, production and technical direction by our very, very fearless leader, Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. And if you would like to support Mission Log directly, and why wouldn't you? You can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
So thanks everyone for spending the time that you have spent with us and letting us be in your ear holes for a while. We will continue to start bringing you these supplemental episodes as we move through the break, because remember, every single week that we get past, that's behind us, we're closer and closer and closer towards the second half of this year and for Prodigy's return. And we want to hear from you always. So make sure that you send us your emails, your comments. Again, make sure that you follow us on Twitter at missionlog or ML_Prodigy. Make sure that you send us your comments at missionlog-prodigy@roddenberry.com. And hopefully, as we spend all this time together and move through the year, Prodigy will return sooner than we expect, which would be a great thing. Stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to YouTube here on the Roddenberry Entertainment channel so that you get all of our updates, etc., etc. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.